Welcome to our ADHD post-diagnostic education session number 2. My name is Lynn White and I'm one of the neurodevelopmental practitioners in the post-diagnostic team, and I have got my colleague Laura with me today as well.
Hi everyone.
So we are now on week 2. What we will do is we will just tell you a little bit about the aims of the session, and then we'll give you a little bit of an idea of the plan for today, and we will deep dive into the topics for week 2. So our aims for the session. These sessions are here to provide you with some of the up-to-date information round about ADHD. It gives you just some information to help build up your sense of your ADHD identity and feel able to communicate your ADHD diagnosis to others and feel confident about ADHD in general. We will be talking about different topics, and we do try to keep things light, but we are mindful that sometimes when we're talking about different things, it can bring up some emotions. We would just ask you to be mindful that if things do feel a little bit triggering for you, please take a break, please grab yourself a cuppa and come back to the sessions when you feel ready to do that. We have popped a few numbers on the screen just for contact details in case you're needing any additional support, but please just take your time with the materials we're presenting. We have also got some numbers at the bottom of the screen that you can contact if you have any questions about your assessment in general. Please contact the ND assessment at problemshared.net address or the telephone number that's there as well. So week 2, what are we going to cover today? We're going to give you a little bit of information around about the core neurodevelopmental differences with ADHD, and that involves executive functioning skills. So we're going to talk all about that today and how that links in with motivation challenges, procrastination cycles, and we're going to talk about some strategies to support you with these executive functioning challenges. We're also going to talk a little bit about decision making and impulsivity and how to manage those areas of ADHD. And we're going to finish the session talking about what are reasonable accommodations that you can ask for in the workplace and how do you go about doing that. So we like to start with just giving you a little bit of point of reflection, having a little think to yourself about what sort of activities have you found over the years you tend to procrastinate on. You find it difficult to get started on. You maybe find it difficult to keep your focus on those tasks, and it can really affect your motivation. Take a couple of minutes to think about some of those things. I certainly know for me, and I'll ask you in a minute, Laura, as well, getting started on things is the one that sticks out for me that I've been aware of for a long time. I know what I need to do. I've done it before. I know the steps. It will only take me 5 minutes. It can be something like sending an email, and I cannot get started. What about yourself, Laura?
I think for myself, it's sometimes emotional things, like my emotional, like trying to make phone calls, like you mentioned, emails. A lot of people talk about housework, so knowing that they need to get up and do something, but finding it incredibly difficult. Some of the clients actually spoke about when it's that transition time, so just getting up off the sofa and going to bed at night. There can be a lot of procrastination where they're trying to build themselves up to all the steps that they have to do to get ready for bed, wash the face, brush the teeth. And so sometimes it's the amount of steps that some people can feel overwhelmed by.
Absolutely.
So that's something I've certainly found,
Yeah, really good examples. So the reason we ask you this question is to try and bring to the forefront just experiences where you have found it difficult to just get organised, get started and get through a task. And we're going to discuss how this links in with ADHD, because ADHD is a neurodevelopmental difference. And what that means is it's a brain difference. So if we go on to the next slide, Laura, we'll have a look at executive functioning. So the brain difference in ADHD is that the part of the brain underneath the forehead in your frontal lobes of your brain here is responsible for executive functioning skills. And that is a whole set of skills that helps you organize, plan, and execute tasks. So it helps you execute daily tasks like getting dressed, making food, sending emails. We need the skills of our executive functioning part of our brain to be able to do these things in a straightforward way. So what it looks like, basically you've got your forehead. Underneath your forehead, there's a whole lot of brain wiring in this part of your brain that helps you do 6 core functions that are called executive functioning skills. And they all work together. It's a little bit like the brain's self-management system. You can see in our slide here, we've got a little green part of the brain that is the frontal lobes of the brain. And we've got a little orchestra conductor here who makes all of these processes work together in a really streamlined, smooth way. That part of our brain is a bit glitchy. The signals in that part of the brain is a bit glitchy, so it affects 6 core functions, and we'll go on to look at them in the next slide. So here we have a model proposed by somebody called Brown about the executive functioning model, and he created this model so that you could kind of understand what is happening in this part of the brain. The wiring and the signaling in this part of the brain is responsible for these 6 core functions: activation, focus, effort, emotion, memory, and action. So we're going to talk through each of these in turn to help us understand them a little bit more. So if we think about activation, this is the part of the brain that's supposed to help us get started on things, be able to get up, get dressed, get that email sent, get the shopping done, be able to just initiate and get started on something. It can be really difficult for people with ADHD to get started. Despite having that real logical awareness, we know what we're trying to do. It's not the fact we don't know what we're doing. It's just the fact that getting started and actually physically doing the task can be quite challenging. In terms of my experience, this one is the one that sort of really shows up for me, getting started on things. And I know day to day when I get up, whether I'm struggling with this one. So I can be sitting at my work, know there's some paperwork to do, know exactly what I need to do. And some days I can get on with it, no problem, and hyper-focus. And then other days I know a 10-minute job is going to take me the whole day. I'm very aware that that physical sensation of being a bit stuck is present, and I get caught in that procrastination loop.
Absolutely. So that's a really good point. That part is where we need to kind of explore the barriers to why we're finding it so difficult. Is it emotional, or is it really that sense of stuckness with ADHD where we just can't seem to get past it?
Yeah.
Another thing to think about is, how do you understand what's happening? So what is the task? Because sometimes, as I mentioned before, there's lots of different steps to something. It might seem pretty overwhelming, might not know where to start. And so it's going to be even harder to activate yourself in that moment. Yeah,
absolutely. Absolutely. And the next executive functioning skill is focus. So being able to keep your focus on something, being able to switch your focus between one thing and another can be really, really challenging for people with ADHD. And if we think back to last session when we were talking about the ADHD iceberg, we have a scattered attention that focuses on everything. It's very difficult to filter anything out. So you can imagine when it comes to shifting attention, it can be really hard because we're taking in so much and we can't filter anything out. And also with our interest-based brain, if we have to shift our attention between something of interest and something of no interest, it can be so difficult pulling that attention constantly, talking to yourself, trying to redirect your attention all the time. It can feel very energy draining. In terms of effort, that kind of ties in as well with focus. So just your ability to sustain that effort long enough to be able to process information and engage with information. So we might have been able to shift our focus, but then straight away we find our attention drifting again. And we're having to say, look at the person, listen to the person. What are they saying? Right? What do I need to ask them? Stop looking out the window. Look at the person. What are they saying? I'm going to have to ask them to repeat themselves. It takes a lot of effort to sustain that attention long enough to be able to complete a task or engage in a conversation or pay attention to a TV program. Anything you want to add to that one, Laura, for effort?
I was just thinking around focus actually, and how sometimes we're distracted by our thoughts as well. So for some people, they have this very internal restlessness, or maybe like a narrative of a to-do list in your head, and that's because these all link together, and actually we can't hold that much in our memory to remember it. And so we might have constant maybe chatter or thoughts that are going to distract us day to day. So it's important to think about how that presents for you. Is it distractions in the environment? Is it internal? Is it in your mind a lot that you're thinking and running over things? Like, when do you lose focus the most? And what strategies can you use to help you to focus better? It could be, if you're distracted by thoughts, writing them down on paper and going back to them later, so kind of empty your head a bit. And yeah, just like you said, Lynn, about they all link together. So, it's very difficult to have that sustained effort over longer periods of time as well. Thanks,
Absolutely. It's so important just to be aware of that, because lots of people don't really understand that kind of restlessness can be internal, not just external influences. So yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The next one is emotions. This is a big one. So lots of people who come through our service and who come to our sessions will describe difficulties with managing feelings, all kinds of feelings: frustration, anger, worry, disappointment, desire, excitement, just feeling these big, big, strong emotions and having a very low tolerance for criticism and things not going well. For me, I think the emotions part is really linked in with our focus, our difficulties with focus, because in order to manage an emotion, you have to notice it in your body. You have to notice the feeling, the physical sensation in your body. So for example, clenching when we're anxious. You have to notice, oh, I'm a bit tense, I'm clenching, I'm starting to get a sort of fast heartbeat, I'm starting to notice I'm uncomfortable. We may notice that momentarily, but then we're distracted. So even if we noticed we're a bit anxious, we won't necessarily have worked out what caused it. We won't necessarily have done anything about it to problem solve it. And the feeling's just going to keep rising because we've not self-soothed. So there's so many steps with managing emotions where our focus and our ability to sustain our attention on our emotions will impact us being able to manage them. So what tends to happen is people will describe that feeling of going from 0 to 100. Because it genuinely feels like I didn't get the cues. And that probably does link in with the fact that you got the cues, but you couldn't keep your attention on it long enough to do anything about it. You got distracted. So the emotion just kept building and building and building till it reached a peak. And then you almost are caught up in a big wave of strong emotion and you have to just ride it out rather than being able to pick a solution to bring the feeling down. This is a really, really common one that I worked with a lot when I worked in child and adolescent mental health services with children coming in with big emotions, usually referred for anxiety management or anger management. And what we would find is it was really, really difficult to do that breakdown of when did you first notice the emotion? What was it related to? What could you have done to bring the emotion down? Lots of the children, young people weren't getting that build up. 1 minute they felt fine, the next minute they were furious. 1 minute they felt fine, the next minute they were panicking, or they were giddy with excitement and couldn't regulate themselves. Any thoughts on that particular one, Laura? It's a really strong one.
Yeah, it's again, it's one that affects all of the other areas, our ability to just manage day to day, how to sort of tolerate frustration, how to manage big emotions. Yeah. And it compounds over time as well. So if we're very sensitive to criticism, but then we're struggling to stay focused and people are criticising us for maybe not getting jobs done, for not putting the effort in, for not getting started on something, that's all going to feed into those big emotions. And it's actually really hard to function day to day if your focus is on your emotion. Yeah. It's going to take over all of these other functions even more.
Absolutely. Yeah. The next one in terms of memory, one of our executive functioning skills is being able to hold things in working memory. And we know for people with ADHD and that particular pattern of brain wiring that it's really difficult to hold things in working memory. So an example of this would be you would need to hold things in working memory if you're reading a page in a book. You need to remember who the character was that they're now talking about, what the storyline was, where the story was taking place. You would need to hold all that in your mind to be able to string the story together for it to all make sense. Same in a conversation. You need to remember what the person talked about 2 minutes ago so that you can come up with a question or a reflection to feed back and make that conversation flow. What happens with ADHD is that there seems to be less slots available for working memory. And even when we do have things in our memory, it can be knocked out really quickly by anything in our surroundings or any internal sensations because of that constant, rapid thinking brain. We can suddenly replace something that we were supposed to be holding on to, like a telephone number, with something else that we've just seen in the environment that's distracted us and was more interesting. So working memory can really show up as something that's challenging for people with ADHD. And you might notice that this is one of the areas where you always knew your memory was a bit glitchy. But as you became more senior in your job, as you became more established in your relationship, as you moved into a stage of being a parent, these working memory challenges can become more exacerbated, and our resilience can go down because we've been dealing with them for so long. So lots of people come to ADHD assessments in midlife because they're starting to notice, I'm really struggling to remember things. I can't remember people's names. I can't remember conversations. I'm having blanks. I'm having memory blanks. And part of it is because if you become, a team lead at work, you're responsible for a whole team of people and their executive functioning. You need to plan and organize and make sure they're getting paid on time. That's a lot of executive functioning skills. If you're a parent and you have a child going to primary school, you have to remember World Book Day and buying a costume. You have to remember it's the PTA raffle and they're supposed to take £1 in. You're supposed to remember PE day is Tuesday, Thursday, but then they change it after the holidays to Monday, Wednesday. That's a lot of executive functioning challenges that are piling up as you go through your life, as you care for older parents. All of these additional challenges that you have as you move through your life can really exacerbate these challenges. And for females in particular, ages of sort of 30s, 40s, 50s onwards, the added change of the reduction in estrogen and progesterone can really exacerbate memory challenges as well, because estrogen receptors are located all over our brain. And when we have low estrogen, that affects memory alongside the ADHD executive functioning glitches as well. So it's an interesting one, how it changes and fluctuates across the lifespan. Anything to add to that one, Laura? Because that's quite a common one that people talk about in our sessions, that my memory, I used to always be able to cope with the memory challenges, but now the tools are just not having the same effect.
Yeah, I think there's so much to remember in this day and age, and it's very difficult if you've got poor working memory to keep things in mind. So it could be that you wake up in the morning, you know that you've got a doctor's appointment, it's in the calendar, you start doing a different activity and you build up this activation and focus, and then you've completely forgotten about the appointment. And you miss it. It could be that you've learned how to do something in work and you know the steps, but every time you go to do it, it feels like a brand new task, like you're just learning again. So a lot to do with sequencing, remembering, how to do things effectively can be difficult, but also remembering dates, times, juggling families, it can become very difficult.
Absolutely. And just with the introduction of technology, although it's supposed to help us, if you've got constant WhatsApps pinging and messages pinging, and then your Teams calendar pinging and your Slack channel pinging, you might be trying to remember something and rehearsing it over and over in your mind, and constantly your attention's getting pulled to something that's pinging in the background. So absolutely. And lastly, action. Action refers to our ability to suppress our impulses. So you may have noticed over the years that it can be really difficult to think before acting out for people with ADHD. We kind of tend to have an idea and we're acting it out before we've even thought about any sort of consequences. And that can show up in quite subtle ways. It doesn't have to be the obvious running about and doing really big impulsive things. It can just be blurting something out, blurting a joke out in the wrong context. It can be purchasing something before you've checked your bank account. It can be going off on a tangent about something when somebody's talking about something completely different. It can be really sort of things that you don't realize are actually impulsivity, but it does tend to play quite a big role for people with ADHD. For me, certainly, it always showed up as seeing something pretty and wanting it immediately. I wanted pretty jewellery. I wanted pretty clothes. I wanted something that looked nice. I wanted a nice cushion, a nice mirror. I think I'm a bit of a magpie, but that's where my impulsivity shows up.
Yeah. And also then I think this kind of impulsivity, sometimes it can mean that we jump to conclusions as well,
Mm-hmm.
and that can really affect our mental health and our emotions. So we can impulsively think that we know what someone's thinking. We can jump to conclusions that aren't necessarily true. It can be really difficult, and the self-regulation within that area can be difficult.
Mm-hmm. I love that one because, I hear that a lot, that people say, I don't think I'm impulsive. But then when you sort of talk about the more subtle ways, especially that, I think I know the answer to things. I think I know what people are going to say. I think I know what people are thinking. That is something that shows up quite a lot.
Interrupting people as well. And that's the thing, is that it just highlights how linked all these different areas are, because actually we interrupt people because we might forget what we're going to say. And so memory and action are then interconnected in that way. So it might feel a bit circular sometimes, but all of those 6 processes just run all the time, side by side.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so much research going on in this area at the moment. So we're still learning all the time. But one of the sort of big speakers in the ADHD world is Russell Barkley. You might have seen him doing some talks and things online. And he is actually proposing that for ADHD, the neurodevelopmental difference is the fact that in this area of our brain, in the part that's supposed to help us with these executive functioning skills, there is a 30% delay across the lifespan in terms of these 6 core skills. So that means that we are not presenting at the same level as perhaps our neurotypical peers and being able to access these skills consistently day to day across our lifespan. So we may present with quite glitchy memory one day. We may present with quite glitchy ability to shift our focus. The next day, it might be slightly better, but it might be a different area that's affected. So this is why it can be quite hard, I think, to understand ADHD at times. It's not static. It's not the same picture every day. It's subtle. And for a lot of people, this is 6 core functions of the brain. There's so many other functions of the brain where you can be quite advanced that mask a lot of this as well. So if you're quite good at, self-awareness and understanding people's emotions, or good at numbers, you can present as highly able and capable in many areas, and people don't realize that you're really struggling with your memory. So that's another area that ADHD is quite misunderstood. It's not a global presentation. It's very much targeted to specific areas that can then kind of affect different things in a more subtle way.
Yeah, absolutely. I was just thinking there about losing focus as well, and how that can affect people day to day. It might be that you really start something and you really want to get focused on it, and you might not be able to concentrate. But the other side of that is that some people actually give things too much focus.
Yeah.
So you might hear us talk about hyperfocus, and even when we talk about hyperfocus, it can be a benefit, or it can be very draining, can make us very tired. But even that has a knock-on effect on all those other areas. So even if it's a hyperfocus rather than a distraction, we're still going to struggle with things like maybe our memory or emotions following hyperfocus, because we might be really drained and burnt out.
Such a good example. And just as well, when somebody kind of interrupts your hyperfocus, that can really affect your emotions, because you're feeling like, I'm right in the middle of this, I'm really enjoying it. The last thing I want to do is shift my attention. So they're all interlinked.
Yeah. And then things like time as well, and transitions between different activities, they all come under this umbrella as well.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lynn. So we're just going to have a look at procrastination for a few slides. So thinking about why we procrastinate. So all of the executive functioning challenges that we've just looked at are going to mean that we're more likely to procrastinate. If we can't remember what we're supposed to be doing, we're going to be sitting, looking at the screen, procrastinating, thinking, I can't remember what they've just asked me to do. I don't know what they wanted this email to be about. That's going to cause procrastination. Sustaining focus, planning and initiation is a big one. So knowing where to start, how to start, does it seem overwhelming? Is it just going to take too long? Is it too much? And prioritizing and time as well. So not having an accurate perception of time can really not be helpful with procrastination. It can lead to those feelings of, what if something's going to take really such a long time and I'm not going to have any time to do anything else, and having that understanding of time in general. And what happens with all of those challenges is that it compounds over time. if we think of these things happening time and time again, we might start, saying to ourselves, oh, what, I'm no good at this. I can never start this task. It's going to take forever. I can't cope with it. It's too boring. And all of these kinds of like self-limiting beliefs and, the internalized things that we tell ourselves, the narrative, that all compounds over time and actually makes it more likely that we're going to procrastinate because we get stuck into a bit of a cycle. So avoidance is a big one, emotional avoidance. So we think it's going to be boring. It makes us anxious. We might be concerned about failing. And so that's going to increase the likelihood of that procrastination as well. So when we talk about compounding over time, we can think of it a bit like this as well in the cycle. So we encounter a challenging situation. So that might be, let's think of an example. For me, it's spreadsheets. Okay, so something admin or spreadsheets or doing someone's hours at work or my expenses. My immediate reaction would be, and it's actually, I can feel it quite physically when I think about it. And then comes the avoidance. So, it might be in my head and thinking, I'll just leave that a bit longer. And it's actually because it's emotional avoidance. But what we tend to do is then self-justify. And I might say, oh, well, I've got another week and, there's no rush. It'll only take me 5 minutes. I can do that later. I'm sure I'll catch up with it. And then when we don't, or when we submit something late, or, it takes 3 hours instead of 1, that starts to erode our confidence. And so when we encounter another similar challenging situation, we end up stuck in the same kind of cycle. So we often procrastinate to avoid emotional experiences and, self-doubt, sense of failure, but it does maintain it in the long run. And it's kind of like an unhelpful coping strategy. Have you got anything to add to that, Lynn?
Just thinking as you're talking how physical this experience can feel. And I'm agreeing with everything you're saying as you're going around there. I'm like, yep, that's all the stuff going on in my head. But sometimes for me, it just feels so physical. That feeling just feels like, it's so boring. I know it's boring. It's going to take me ages. I don't like this. I can't make it fun. So yeah, you just feel yourself in that procrastination cycle. And I always say, if we didn't have the self-awareness, we could maybe use that extra time for something productive. But it's not like that. We're caught in that procrastination cycle and continuously going round in that loop. So we're not using the time for anything helpful. We just keep thinking, oh, this is difficult. Oh, it's going to be hard for me. I don't know if I want to do this. Oh, it's going to take ages. And it feels quite a difficult place to be sometimes because you wish you could just shut it down and go and do something else and come back.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's that feeling of awfulness and actually trying to convince yourself to get started, and sometimes it's confusing, like my body's not moving. I'm telling myself to just do it, and it is quite physical sometimes where we just can't get that motivation. It's kind of like a barrier, like a wall of I can't do this, or something's going to go wrong, or it'll take too long. And sometimes we might not even be aware of those thoughts. It might just be that we actually just feel stuck. We just feel completely stuck and can't start it. So that's kind of like an example of how it might compound over time with all of these cycles and with all the executive function differences. But to be aware of cycles like this means that you might become more aware of that feeling, as we call it, and try and build up new strategies to, maybe not avoid it, maybe build up our confidence and self-esteem. So these are some procrastination strategies. Some are more practical than others, and some of them are going to take a bit of time and practice and energy, probably. So we'll start with the more practical one is probably one step at a time. So when we feel like we're completely stuck, my example of a spreadsheet, I might just look at it and panic. If I break that down into chunks, only focus on the next step. Okay, let's, fill in 10 boxes or, write the name at the top, breaking it down into small and really small chunks, achievable chunks, and focus only on the next step. So rather than feeling like it's a big, overwhelming experience, we can convince ourselves that we can manage this bit. This is just a small bit, and that can get us started. Nike has a point. So it's easier said than done, it really is. But simply starting a task can make it a lot easier to come back to. And even if that is the tiniest step, could be, writing a date at the top of a page, writing the first paragraph, could be just, I don't know, hoovering one room when you need to do the whole house. So just starting can make it easier to come back to because you've already pushed through that kind of awful feeling and started the task. And then some of the others, as I say, take quite a bit of practice and take a bit of getting used to if you are quite critical to yourself. So the first is don't beat yourself up. So if you think about how self-critical we are sometimes, and if you don't finish a task, what are the things you're saying to yourself? Are you being kind to yourself, or are you being really cruel to yourself? And how does it impact on your motivation when you are critical of yourself? Because usually that chips away at our confidence even more and erodes that confidence. Good enough is good enough. So just thinking about, it doesn't have to be perfect. Sometimes we think we've got to do everything, or if we start a certain thing, it's got to be an absolutely perfect level. Think about what good enough is for you, and challenge those unrealistic standards. And then all of those combined comes into this idea of reframing our thoughts. So gradually starting to think about, instead of saying things like, this is going to take forever, it's too late to start, trying to reframe our thoughts into like, what would be the next step? What would be the next thing I could manage? And being really kind to yourself, because, hopefully now you understand why you procrastinate, why things are difficult to get started on. And reframing those thoughts is really a key step in, building your confidence and being really, really kind to yourself in those situations. Have you got anything else you want to add to that, Lynn, or do you want to move on?
I think just in general, what this makes me think about is just on the iceberg when we talked about having rejection sensitivity dysphoria means that it drives perfectionism. And for us, we want to give our best. We want to finish the task. We want to be getting good results. But it's trying to find strategies to just reduce those expectations a little bit, to make it a bit more manageable for us. And I know that's hard when we're perfectionists. So for me, I'm just working on that one at the bottom left that says good enough is good enough. And I've always struggled to just lower my expectations. But my kind of recent mantra is, I'm only as good as my last 24 hours. How much I've eaten, how much I've drank, how much sensory overwhelm I've had, how much rejection sensitivity I've been dealing with. And the performance I gave today was as good as I could given my last 24 hours. So trying to kind of find ways to just reduce expectations in a way that feels helpful to you. So for me, yeah, just framing it like that, like it's only the last 24 hours. Today's one day, tomorrow might be different if I have a different set of circumstances. Yeah, just making absolutely. It a little bit more manageable.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. And I was just thinking then as you were talking as well, for people who maybe aren't employed at the moment, or who don't really have any work tasks to do, this can apply to things like just home life and bringing up children and comparing ourselves to other people, and I should be able to clean the house and look after the kids and make the tea and everything should be just right. And actually which parts of that can we take away safely? Like, does it matter if we don't hoover today? Can we leave it anyway? To take that pressure off yourself, because there's a massive pressure to be good enough, I guess. Mm-hmm. And that's what we want to try and reframe and let you know that you're doing just fine as you are.
Really good point, Laura.
So I'm going to pass on to Lynn now, who's going to explain to us how we can kind of get our brains more motivated and engaged.
Thank you. So yeah, we've talked about the executive functioning glitches and challenges. And we need to just, again, be kind to ourselves and understanding what can we reasonably take responsibility for, and where does some of the responsibility lie with other people. So we are going to talk in a minute about reasonable accommodations and how we can think about our environment supporting us. But these are really the key 4 areas that show up in research in terms of helping people with ADHD, and particularly these executive functioning challenges. I am probably not telling you anything new. You will already be using a lot of strategies under these 4 headings, but we're just going to talk through them to bring them to the forefront of your mind and give you that confidence that actually a lot of the things you're doing are super helpful for your brain. And that is the only thing you could take responsibility for. There's not a whole load of other things that you can be doing. So these are the 4 key areas: making something interesting, making it novel, doing it in a novel way, relying on the urgency kicking in to get something done, or creating a bit of a challenge. These are the 4 areas that help us with these executive functioning challenges. So we're going to look at them in a little bit more detail and give you some examples. So in terms of interest, this is probably one that you do a lot of already, but you didn't realize you were doing it. So we talked about last week with the iceberg diagram. We have an interest-based brain. So if we are being asked to do something that we know is dull, is not interesting to us, just doesn't hold our interest, we may have to switch it up a bit, create a bit of interest just to get through that task. For children and young people, creating things into a bit of a game. You've probably done this if you have children. Let's race each other to get our shoes on. Making a sort of mundane task just that little bit more interesting can get you through the task. For adults, I tend to find task hitching is the common thing people are doing, and that involves doing something fun or interesting alongside the boring task to try and get the dopamine levels up and kind of ride that wave of dopamine and get the boring task done. So for me, that looks like listening to an audiobook or listening to a podcast while I'm doing the dishwasher or while I am tidying up. That just gets my interest up. It gets my brain firing. It just makes the mundane task of picking up dishes and putting them in the dishwasher repeatedly just that little bit more manageable. Have a little think to yourself. Is there any task hitching that you're doing? Is that one that you notice, Laura, quite a lot?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll always have like podcast music when I'm trying to do tasks that I really don't want to do. Mm-hmm. I also rely on kind of background noise quite a lot to work. So I have to have some kind of stimulation, as in noise, when I'm actually doing my work, which a lot of people, I know certainly with my children, before I knew I had ADHD, I'd probably say to them, you can't have your music on while you're doing your work. But, you know, for some of us, that's our task hitching. Or it could be going for a walk and listening to a meeting or in work, or, you know, just doing something that really lifts your dopamine levels.
Yeah. And that's why lots of people find it difficult. And we'll come on to this in a minute about asking for reasonable accommodations. But task hitching is one of the reasons why people want to listen to music while they're doing their work, or want to have their headphones on and doing something else whilst typing out their emails, because it gets that dopamine up. It gets you to focus a little bit more, having that stimulation going on. So absolutely. One of the other ways of creating interest is just front loading the dopamine, getting that dopamine level up, because we talked about the dopamine levels being slightly lower than they should be in the ADHD brain. So that feeling of motivation and propelling you through to finish a task can be a bit more challenging. So front loading the dopamine can look like cycling to work, or going for a swim before you go to work, or just doing something that makes you feel really good, listening to really loud rock music in the car on the journey to work, so that when you get into work, you've still got that sort of higher level of dopamine to get in there and get the sort of admin tasks done that you have to do first thing. So just getting that dopamine up. For some people, that just looks like having a lot of, you know, their favorite cup of coffee in the morning, because that's the thing that gets their dopamine level up. So it might be that you're noticing already, actually, yeah, I do that. I grab for whatever it is in the morning, because that just gets me going first thing. And then I can get on with the more sort of mundane tasks when I get into the workplace. Something that works really well for people with ADHD as well is mini rewards. And it's wonderful if you work in a workplace that does have a sort of system to support this. So we're quite lucky in Problem Shared that we have a kudos system where day to day people can just write down what they liked about your work or how you supported them. And you get a little kind of ping to tell you somebody's celebrating something you've done, which is lovely. But if you're not in a company or you're not in a place where you get those rewards regularly, we really, really benefit from having that acknowledgement. We really, really benefit from having a wee boost, a little treat, because our brains are working so incredibly hard. It doesn't really work for us waiting on our monthly review to be told that we've done something well. We almost need a reward in the morning and an afternoon to keep us motivated. So if you're anything like me, I've been very aware of the fact that I need rewards, and for years and years have always treated myself with little things at the end of a busy day. So maybe a magazine back in the day. Now it would probably tend to be like a notepad or something, or a pair of earrings or something small. So trying to find rewards that can really sort of boost you, but also maybe don't play into that impulsivity, because the rewards as well can kind of lead you down that line of spending a lot of money. So yeah, just many rewards, many things that don't require too much sort of finance.
It could even be doing something you enjoy as well, couldn't it, Lynn? So giving yourself that reward of time. So, okay, when I've done this thing tonight, I'm going to, I don't know, build me Lego or go for a walk with the dog.
Yeah.
And actually building that in, if that feels like a reward to you. Obviously, everyone's very different.
Yeah, absolutely. Other things we can do is create novelty. So if you've got to do the same thing over and over again, can you make it slightly more interesting? If you're working from home, can you change the room in which you're working? Just change the environment a little bit. If you're sitting in an office all day, can you pop out at lunchtime and get outside into nature for a little bit? If you're having to do lots of paperwork, can you use different coloured highlighters, different coloured post-its, just make it look a little bit more interesting, can make it just that little bit more intriguing for your brain. Can we switch modes in terms of reading and listening? Can we sort of listen to a podcast rather than reading a book? Can we have a conversation rather than just having to sit in a team meeting and try and take in all that's going on around about us? Find different creative ways to be able to take in the information. And for some people, there's a concept called body doubling. And what that means is just working alongside somebody. You don't have to be interacting about the piece of work. You don't have to be engaging with each other, but the presence of another person sometimes can just give us that sense of focus. So an example might be, if you've been told that you've got the flexibility to work from home, you might find, actually, I prefer to go to an internet cafe. I quite like the flexibility of working from home, but I need to be around people in order to get me to focus. Because if I'm left to my own devices, I'll be looking out the window, I'll be putting the washing on, I'll get completely distracted. So just having that other person just there can help us to sort of focus a little bit.
It can also really help link, can't it, with little things like cleaning the house. Invite someone around, like have a family member or friends come and sit with you while you're cleaning up. There's certain apps online where you can watch other people like making the bed and cleaning the house.
Absolutely.
And that's a form of body doubling. I know my son used to be on FaceTime to his friends while he was doing his homework. And I didn't realise at the time I was telling him off because he wasn't concentrating, but actually that was actually giving him the motivation.
Yeah.
So it can be used in loads of different ways. It's really helpful for some people.
I love that idea. I think I do that actually when I'm cooking. I put on somebody else cooking something. It doesn't even have to be the same thing as me, but them cooking and me cooking just kind of keeps me focused a little bit. So yeah, amazing. Introducing the concept of challenge. If a task feels a little bit dull, can we make it just slightly more challenging? That can sometimes get the dopamine levels up a bit and excite our brains. So you might have heard of the concept of eat that frog. If you had to do something unpleasant every day, when would be your productivity window? When would you be able to do that most easily? Would it be first thing in the morning, get it out of the way? For me, it would always be after morning break. I need to wake up, I need to settle in, I need to have some food, and then I can do the sort of more challenging tasks. For other people, it might just be relying on the fact that we work well under pressure. Our brain seems to be able to do things when they become urgent. So it might be that if you've got a really difficult task like filling in your travel expenses, you just have to leave it till 4:45 and you'll get it done in that 15 minutes. And try to be kind to yourself and not sort of be really critical that you couldn't get it done earlier. It's one of those tasks, it's difficult, I'll get it done in the last 15 minutes. So having that confidence that our urgency does usually tend to kick in. We do usually hand in something. It's just it might not be up to those perfectionist standards. But if you're anything like me, even if I had till the end of time to write a paper, I still wouldn't get it perfect. I would still be correcting it and doing things to it, if I had all the time in the world to kind of make those corrections.
I think with urgency as well, then it's one of those things where it's really powerful to get us motivated, but it can also be really like detrimental if we leave something to the last minute and it takes a lot longer than we thought.
Yeah, that time management.
Eating to our family life, So we'll move on to some strategies, but thinking about how can we be accurate about how long something's going to take as well, so that we don't put ourselves at risk of burning ourselves out.
Absolutely. So yeah, I'm just noticing the last wee bits in the urgency one, just in terms of things like having an accountability buddy at work can be helpful. So if there's somebody you trust at work, somebody that understands some of the challenges and strengths that you experience, having them just check in with you a bit more regularly, having them create maybe pre-deadlines so that you're not waiting till the last minute, but they maybe check in with you a week earlier. Just show me a draft copy of that so that you're getting started and you're not doing that, leaving everything till the last minute. Sometimes just setting the rule for yourself. I'm going to put on a timer. I'm going to do this task for 10 minutes. And regardless of where I get to, I'm stopping. Just getting started can mean that we get into hyper focus and we do complete it. But if we don't, we've started it and that's the hardest bit. So when we come back, it might be easier just to complete the task the next time around. And for some people, using visuals, imagining your future self, how you're going to feel when you actually get this task done can be a good motivator for some people as well. So a few different strategies there that you probably notice you're already starting to use some of these. These are the things that we can be responsible for. But again, day to day, your energy levels and ability to use these strategies might fluctuate. Okay. So some of the things to just create interest and novelty and a bit of challenge is to try and think about using tools, using technology, just to take some of that load off your brain. So in terms of planning and time management, try and externalize some of these things. Don't try and expect your brain to be able to hold all of that and store all of that information and bring it to the forefront of your mind when you know that you struggle with working memory and attention and focus. Externalize some of these things. Use your different apps on your phone. Use timers if you can. Use wall charts. If you're somebody who likes color and picture, highlight with different colors. Use an analog clock. Use the one with the timer hands in it to try and see the passage of time. If you can use different colors and make it a lot more attractive, then it might draw your attention a little bit more. And there's lots of different tools. I don't know if anybody has used these tools, but I really like Goblin Tools. I was introduced to it through Problem Shared. And Goblin Tools is a little program that you can go onto just on Google, type in Goblin Tools, and it's got a search bar. And you can type in any activity and it will break it down into all the steps for you. So I don't know about you, Laura, but this is one of the things I find really difficult is looking at a task and then actually accurately allowing enough time for all the steps involved in the task.
Yeah, and absolutely.
Goblin Tools breaks that down for you, which just really helps highlight to family members or to work colleagues just how many executive functioning skills are required for certain straightforward tasks. Mm. Another thing Goblin Tools does, which one of our other colleagues was telling me that I didn't realize, is you can type in any ingredients that you've got in your fridge and it'll tell you how to make a meal out of the things that are left in your fridge. Yeah. How amazing is that? That's such a cool thing.
I think it also estimates as well then, like how long the task might take.
Ah, brilliant.
Which is really good because sometimes, again, going back to that procrastination, we might think something's going to take hours. We can put it in there, whatever activity it is, and it will give us an estimate of the time so that we can help to develop our awareness there.
It's brilliant. Yeah. Yeah, because I do not have a realistic sense of time. So that would be really helpful for me. The Pomodoro method is also another tool that can be helpful. You get little apps, so Pomodoro apps, and you can get it on YouTube as well. And it's basically helping you allocate time for focus and then time for a break and then time for focus and time for a break. So it'll maybe give you kind of 20 minutes working or 10 minutes working with a couple of minutes break and then back into focus time again. So it just helps you organize your time to help with productivity. Some people find that really helpful. And we have also got time blocking. So time blocking is basically scheduling your tasks into fixed blocks of time. So you can group activities together if it's all your admin tasks or all your tidying tasks, grouping it together. And again, you can make it look really attractive and it can help kind of just keep you on task. I'm certainly somebody who loves this sort of stuff. I love old style charts and drawing out tables and highlighting and moving post-its from one column to the next. I love all of that. I am not somebody who works well with the electronic calendars. It's just not my thing. But you can do this online as well. There's lots of programs that you can actually do. I think Trello is one of the ones that we use, isn't it, Laura, where you can sort of organize different activities and batch them into different order of when you're doing them and who's responsible for them.
Yeah,
so yeah,
absolutely. And it can be, again, you can use it for work. Might have a whiteboard or a blackboard in your kitchen and just block it into tasks, home tasks that you need to do. So maybe cleaning, shopping, budgeting, whatever it might be, so that you've got sort of an idea of what your day is going to look like as well.
Yeah. And for me, I think if I was doing this time blocking, I would do it a day at a time. If I had the week, I would become overwhelmed. I would just think, oh, that's a lot of stuff to do. So I would maybe just break it into Monday morning, what am I doing? Monday afternoon, what am I doing? And check it off. So yeah, you can use it in different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. It's just about trying it, isn't it? And seeing what works for different people. Okay. So we're just going to move on just to have a think about decision making and impulsivity. So managing impulsivity can be incredibly difficult. It's instant, obviously, impulsive. So things just happen instantly and we may not mean to do it, or we may just make decisions very quickly and instantly. So we can think of impulse control or decision-making ability in terms of a cup full of that thing. So a cup full of impulse control or a cup full of decision-making. So everything takes from our cup throughout the day. So the more self-control we have throughout the day, maybe we work or we're going out to like baby groups or being at the school, and we're trying to contain those impulsive things. So we're trying not to react to things impulsively. We're trying to not interrupt people. We're trying to concentrate in a meeting. So all of those things takes out of our cup. And throughout the day, the cup becomes lower and lower. So that by the end of the day, it might be that you impulsively make decisions without really thinking about them, or it could be, if we're talking about decision making, it might be really incredibly difficult to make a decision by the end of the day because you've been had to make those decisions all day. You've had to contain these emotions. So the more self-control or cognitive load throughout the day means that we have less in our cup by the end of the day. So it can be incredibly difficult to manage impulsivity and decision making for that reason, for those differences.
This is one that really shows up, Laura, in children and young people. So when I worked with CAMS, this is one that you would see really clearly after you pick children up from school, that their ability to suppress their impulses, manage their emotions, and constantly refocus themselves just completely disintegrates after a full day of putting in that effort all day. So yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And making decisions maybe for adults after work, having to decide what to cook for everyone. That kind of thing when you're an adult can be incredibly difficult and frustrating because it could be a little decision, but you just can't seem to get there because you're exhausted. So we'll have a little look at managing impulsivity. It really is a difficult area. So, please be kind with yourself and patience when you're exploring new strategies because they can happen so quickly. You might not even be aware of it. And there's certain things about it that might be a real benefit. There's some things about being impulsive that's really, really lovely and adventurous and, quick thinking. So it's not always a really bad thing. But if it's something that you do struggle with and you feel like it's having quite a negative impact, it'd be the first thing I would say to do is try and identify triggers. Are you tired after a long day at work when these things are happening? Is it when you're with lots of people that you might be more impulsive and start to interrupt? You can use things like impulse logs. So that's just, keeping a record of when you feel like you have been impulsive and what situation you were in. And the idea for that is that you might be able to limit, those high risk situations or to reduce the triggers as well. Delaying, distract, and decide is a really good one for impulsiveness in terms of maybe either saying something you might not mean or even impulsive spending as well. So delaying that, put it in your shopping basket, but go and do something else and come back and then decide whether you still want it. Or it could be that you really want to say something to someone and your frustration tolerance is really low. Delay that. Take yourself off to the toilet. Go make a cup of tea and then decide whether you want to say it. And that's easier said than done because it can happen instantly. Like things can just be said without thinking. Self-binding rules are good for things, again, similar situations. So counting in your head before you respond to someone can give you just long enough to make a barrier there. It could be that you have to wait 24 hours before you buy the thing in your basket. So setting yourself rules and using them to your benefit. And then mindfulness as well. So again, really tough. It's all about creating a bit of a gap between the stimulus and the response in any way that you can. Have you got anything to add to that, Lynn? It's a really difficult area, isn't it?
I just smiled because my best friend on Amazon is save it for later. Put it in the basket, save it for later. And the fact that actually removes it off your kind of instant buying thing and puts it in a little category that you have to go back into adds an extra step.
Absolutely. I think I've got about 500 books in my save for later.
A long list of save it for later. But the same with emails as well, draft emails, rather than sending them immediately, sort of draft it, leave it in the draft section and go back to it later. So hard to do, but these things do really help. And just that delay and distract as well, just removing things like, especially for spending, the apps on your phone that just constantly have things pinging up all the time. Get rid of the Vinted app, get rid of whatever it is that's kind of grabbing your attention and making you think you instantly need that thing. Can be helpful. Not forever, but just, in times when you're feeling a bit more vulnerable.
Yeah. And that comes back to kind of identifying your triggers.
Yeah.
When are you feeling vulnerable? Is it because you're feeling really down? Is it because you've, struggled at work? So just being mindful of that as well. A lot of self-awareness is needed for that.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I touched on decision making. It can be incredibly hard by the end of the day to make decisions. Systematically evaluating, different options can be really challenging because of our executive functioning differences. So juggling all that information, deciding, what's best, what the best action is. Work and memory can make it really difficult to remember and juggle that information. Distractibility, impulsivity, there's lots of reasons why it can be incredibly hard. Rush decision making, if we're unsure, of time or how long we want to spend thinking on something. And a lot of the problem here is that decision fatigue. So the decision quality tends to go down the more decisions we have to make throughout the day. So obviously, if you're a parent, if you've got to make lots of decisions for your children, for your workplace, your decision quantity affects the quality, if that makes sense. We might also be prone to quite what we call hot decision making, which is just impulsive decision making. So because of those executive functioning challenges and finding it really difficult to think things through in order to make a decision, we might just jump to that impulsive decision making because that's easier for our brains. It might be that you overthink every single decision, and we have a lot of those what ifs. What if I make the wrong decision? Or just make them really quickly, so it can go one way or the other. And then sometimes we can get into a state of kind of paralysis where we just can't seem to understand or can't make that decision because of, again, the differences in the way we think and analyse things. But we can be very good at making really quick decisions and helpful ones. There can be so many benefits to quick decision making, particularly in crisis and helping other people to make decisions, but we might not be able to choose what to cook for our dinner. So it's that difference that you might notice that, I'm really good, I can make quick decisions in the workplace, but I can't decide what to watch on telly or what to eat. It can be quite inconsistent. And it might be choice overload as well. So that can lead to decision fatigue if we've got too many options, too many things to juggle and think about. So trying to make the actual choice smaller, like maybe between two things can help. So these are some strategies for decision making. So as we spoke about decision fatigue, trying to limit decision making at those risky times. So, if it's at the end of the day, can we have meals ready so we don't have to decide what we're going to eat? Could it be that someone else decides what you're going to watch on the telly that night because it's just you're too fatigued to figure that out? Time blocking is good for anyone who overthinks with decisions. So just limiting yourself to a block of time to make that decision, and that can increase urgency. So it can help with procrastination, and it can just mean that we're not wasting a lot of time trying to think of the decision, the right one. Finding perspective is something I often find very difficult, because when you're in the moment and it can seem like it's really important, sometimes we need to take a step back or get someone else to help us with that. And they can ask questions, or you can ask them yourself, like, how much will this matter in an hour? If I make this decision and it's wrong, is it gonna bother me next week or next year? Most of the time the answer is no, unless it's a big decision. And so then we were able to put that into perspective a little bit. And using an accountability buddy or someone to be accountable to. So it could be a partner, a friend, just sharing that decision-making process and getting them to help you to think through and weigh up the benefits. And scenario analysis. So again, that's a lot to do with our perspectives, thinking what's the worst thing that could happen if I make this decision, and what's the best thing, and what's the most likely. And that can help us to put it into perspective a bit as well. How do you feel about decisions, Lynn? Is that something you find hard, or do you make
so hard
decisions?
So hard with that kind of perfectionist tendencies, and my children are the same. Just even making decisions about what you want to eat, about where you want to go, it becomes just a procrastination cycle. Absolutely. And I think just with what you were saying, I was hearing a lot of overlap between the strategies for impulsivity and the strategies for procrastination and decision making. And a lot of them, just as you've sort of highlighted, do involve a bit of brain work. So if we're talking through these and you're thinking, oh my goodness, I'm so tired, I'm so overwhelmed, we are going to talk about next time as well, actually some of the more body-based strategies to help you just look after yourself if you don't have access to that thinking brain, because there's so much going on. So it might be that you're noticing, I'm really struggling with decision making, I'm really struggling with impulsivity, and you don't have to think about it. You might just then go and put your weighted blanket on for half an hour. You might just go and take a walk outside for a little bit. So there are different options in terms of what you can do depending on how you are and where you're at in terms of your day-to-day sort of stressors and coping strategies.
Yeah, that's a really good point, Lynn, because I think sometimes we can get overwhelmed. I think we've got to use all these strategies and we've got to make things work. And as well, don't forget that novelty factor. So some of these strategies you might try, they might work for a short time, and then you might forget they exist, or, the novelty wears off, and then we might be quite critical of ourselves. And actually it's thinking about, we don't have to fix anything. These are just little ideas to help. And like Lynn said, there might be more body-based, like emotional regulation kind of activities that may help us to be in that better place anyway to manage things.
And for a lot of people as well, it's self-compassion, isn't it? I think just listening and hearing out loud that this is our glitchy executive functioning. It's not our fault. It's not our choice. We're not in control of it. Just can sometimes in the moment make you think, oh, it's my glitchy executive functioning. I don't have to do anything. I just have to be aware that's just how my brain works. And actually, maybe now isn't the best time to make that decision. Or maybe I need to ask for a bit of help to make this decision because it's just a bit glitchy today. Might be different tomorrow.
Absolutely. Thanks, Lynn. So we're just going to spend the last part of the session just looking at some reasonable adjustments.
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about what do you have control over? What can you take responsibility for in terms of that glitchy executive functioning? We can try and make things interesting. We can try and make things novel, try and use that urgency and create a bit of challenge. But what do other people in the environment have to take responsibility for? Because we can't do everything. We're trying to get through our day. We're trying to get our work done. We're trying to be the best parent we can be or the best partner. We cannot do everything. And we don't want to have to mask, as has been the case for many years, because it's very draining for us. So, in terms of legislation, there is the Equality Act 2010. And under that piece of legislation, ADHD was considered to be a disability, not because ADHD is a disability in of itself, but because society is disabling for people with ADHD because we don't have the same access to things as perhaps our neurotypical peers and colleagues. So, under that piece of legislation, you have an entitlement to ask for reasonable accommodations in the environment where you work. So for some people, you might be going through this process, you might be very familiar with it, other people might not have too much information about it. So we're just going to give you a sort of overview about what does this process look like and what sort of things can you ask for. So we will go on to the next slide. Across the UK and Ireland, there's so many different stages that companies are at in terms of introducing reasonable accommodations. So some companies have got policies in place, they've got procedures, they've got people you have to direct these questions to, they've got menus of things you can pick from to make your life at work just that little bit more manageable. Other companies are really early on and they've not even sort of done any CPD yet with their teams round about ADHD. So they're at the very early stages and they might not have a clear process that you have to follow. So that's the stage we're at the moment. So in terms of trying to work out how do I share this with my employer? What sort of stage is my company at? We might consider if they've got sort of green flags, things that make you think they are moving towards being more inclusive and supportive. So you might notice your colleagues are openly talking about ADHD, autism, dyslexia. There might be sort of networks or groups that you can kind of join to share some of the challenges and some of the strategies that are helping people in your team. Your employer might have already started to lay on neurodiversity training that you can access. And you might have noticed in the recruitment process, they asked you, do you need any reasonable accommodations? These are all sort of signs that your company is aware and trying to move in the direction of being inclusive and neuroaffirmative. If you're noticing that actually there's not an awful lot of open discussions, that in the workplace in general, there's not a really high level of satisfaction, it feels like it's tokenistic when people talk about ADHD and autism rather than being all inclusive. And if people are a bit defensive and come up with clunky responses in terms of conversations about autism, ADHD, and dyslexia, that might be making you think that actually my company's not actually very far down the line of being able to kind of have a smooth process for asking for reasonable accommodations.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the thing I always make clear here is that if there are those red flags, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't disclose. It just means that, you know, you've got that knowledge to think about how to do that, what knowledge the company might need to support you as well. So we're going to have a look at some different services at the end, but there's funding for companies to have training in neurodiversity so that, you know, they're able to start to move in that direction as well. So just to advise you that, you know, it doesn't mean don't tell them. It just means that they might need a bit more support to support you. Okay, so how to advocate for yourself. So it can be incredibly difficult. It might be that you've worked somewhere for a long, long time and you look like you're managing, and then it can be very difficult to then say, actually, I've got this diagnosis and I think I could really benefit from some reasonable adjustments. That can be really hard because from the outside, you might look absolutely fine and they might not see any problems, but that might be affecting your home life, your energy levels. So it's never too late to ask. It doesn't mean that you have to keep masking and struggling. It's absolutely, you know, your right to ask. So how we go about that, identifying your own needs is really important. I've just mentioned masking then, and if you mask really heavily, you hide things and pretend everything's okay, it can be hard for you to even reflect on what your needs might be. So that would be the first thing, would be to try and identify what would be helpful. You know, what needs might you have. and then communicating that clearly, and proposing solutions. So by communicating it very clearly, the employer is aware of what your needs are and how you might be struggling in the workplace. And by proposing solutions, it shows that you kind of want to work together. So it's not kind of that language of all the responsibility on the employer. It's kind of like, okay, let's propose something. How might this help me, and how might it help you together? Keeping a document of your needs. So just keeping a record of how certain expectations or conditions in work might affect you, and how you think adjustments could help. And practice assertive communication, which is really difficult if you're not in a place to do that. It can be really hard to be assertive with communication. But I guess just sometimes we say things in a way that might evoke sort of biases or ableist norms and practices. So it's just thinking about how we word things so that we can get people on the same page as us in order to get these adjustments in place. So I've put a few examples here of language and how we might want to ask for adjustments. So it could be with things like the environmental sensory environment. We could say that, the open plan office with the constant noise is really distracting. This noise disables me. So putting the focus on the environment. It's not a problem with you, it's a problem with the office environment. And stating your needs is the way that we are quite assertive. So, our needs requires a space to concentrate and to perform at my best. And then that suggestion making as well. Because that's often very valued. It's like proactive when somebody actually says, I know what I need. This is what might help me. Can you provide it? So maybe could you consider noise cancelling headphones or a more private workspace? In terms of communication, this is one that it can be quite difficult to ask for people to change their communication. But it's not, it doesn't cost anything. It doesn't cost anything. It's just someone understanding your thought processes, the way you communicate, and maybe asking them to make it clearer. So the expectation to respond immediately in conversations is challenging for me. And, state your needs. I need a bit more time to process and respond. Could we have brief pauses in our conversations to give me time to think? It could be that you want, clear step-by-step processes or checklists. That would come under communication as well. Have you got anything to add to those too, Lynn?
I think just in terms of any of the reasonable accommodations is always sort of asking for a trial and a review. So having that sort of supportive safety net in place for yourself and for the company as well, that can we trial it? If you're resistant, if you're not sure if this is going to work for me, can we trial it? And I'll come back to you and let you know, and we can check if it, affected productivity or not. But also reviewing, because you don't want it to be a tokenistic one-off meeting. We give you a standing desk and then that's going to solve the problems forevermore. It is a case of actually review it after a few months and just check, is that having the effect you thought it would have? Is it helpful? Is it not helpful? What else could be done? Just it's a kind of work in progress, isn't it? It's not just a kind of one-off meeting.
Yeah,
it can be really
absolutely
helpful.
Yeah, thanks, Lynn. Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's working together, thinking of solutions, and actually what people find is that it benefits the company. And the company start to realise that with these trials, so it can be helpful. Maybe things like transitions. So we spoke a bit about, getting interrupted in the middle of something, or, might be hyper focused on something, or we might not be able to get our focus going and build it up. So transitions and workflow is something that you could think about. So the expectation to respond immediately to emails might disrupt your workflow. So it could be, that you need designated times to check and respond to those emails. And that's where you could use the kind of time task batching, having a set amount of time to respond to things and having a set amount of time for focus work. Could we establish specific times for checking my emails and messages to reduce that interruption? And tasks and deadlines might be, the expectation to manage your own time, produce work with no deadlines might be really challenging. I know that certainly would for me. No deadlines would mean no urgency, and no understanding of when it needed to be done. So, state your needs. I need deadlines in order to manage my time and my work. And could we set realistic deadlines or break the project down? And it might be that you ask for someone to meet with you more regularly with smaller deadlines to increase the urgency. So I think often people, when we talk about reasonable adjustments, they often think of a cost, that's fair, Lynn, isn't it? A lot of people think,
Yeah.
oh, they're going to ask for, all this software equipment, which you might well do. You might ask for some software, time management kind of things. But actually, there's so many things that are free. And it's just about your work style, your productivity, and taking into consideration what you need in the workplace. Okay. So the last little thing to mention is that if you have had reasonable adjustments put in place by your employer, so you've been through some of those questions, you've identified your needs in the workplace, you've discussed it, you're having reviews with that, but there's still some other things that you think might benefit you. Maybe things like ADHD coaching or working from, I don't know, getting some more software or equipment that work wouldn't necessarily pay for. So there is this Access to Work, which is a government grants programme, and it helps with those kinds of extra things on top of reasonable adjustments. So it's a long waiting list at the moment. I think it's about 6 months. That could change. And they do a short assessment with you, and they recommend things that might help you. So you could go with, an area of difficulty, time management. I've already put reasonable adjustments in place. My employer's trying to help me. I'm still struggling. Do you have any suggestions? And they might have something else, some other software or something that might help. They make the recommendations, and they write a report. The only thing is to be aware of is that your employer would need to know, because they need to pay the first percentage of it. So for small companies, it's a smaller percentage that they have to pay. For larger companies, that might be more. But for things like ADHD coaching, if that's not available in your workplace, it's a really good option. I know certainly for my coaching, it was completely paid for by Access to Work. So my company didn't have to fund that. So it's certainly worth looking into if you feel, there's extra things on top of it that will help you support you in the workplace. As part of that as well, there's this new service, Access to Work mental health support. So it's a confidential service, this one, and your employer doesn't need to know at all if you don't want them to. So it's Maximus, and I think there's one called Able Futures as well. So there's those two that run it. And if you apply to this, it's for mental health support, but not clinical. But it's basically a mental health coach for up to 9 months who will check in with you, who will help you with your overall mental well-being, and help with really work-based things as well. So might suggest reasonable adjustments to you that you could ask for and help you with that process as well. So I hope that makes sense. It's just extra funding for practical support, which is beyond reasonable adjustments. It can include things like coaches, support workers, specialist equipment. So that's just something for you to think about as well. Okay. Brilliant. Have you got anything to add, Lynn, to any of the...
I was just thinking about, I believe that we send out resources as well. So we do send out a spreadsheet with a whole list of ideas of things that people can request in terms of reasonable accommodations, and a lot of sort of helpful handouts that you can share with employers as well. So if you're having to wait for access to work, you can look through the resources we're sending and start to compile a bit of a list of things that you want to discuss with your employers. Because I know a lot of people in our sessions will say, I don't know what to ask for because I don't know what's available. So we will suggest some things, and we also explain why it's really helpful in terms of ADHD, so that it gives you that vocabulary and gives you a little bit of confidence about starting those conversations with your employer.
Yeah, brilliant. Thanks, Lynn. Fabulous. So thank you all for watching. I hope you found it useful. And yeah, thank you again.
Thank you so much, everyone.